Do you sometimes find it difficult to deal with powerful, unpleasant emotions like anxiety or anger or fear? If so, this video is for you. Hello, my friend. I hope you are well. My name is Matt Tenney. I'm the author of The Magic of Mindful Self-Awareness: How to Stop Overthinking, Clear Your Mind, and Be Happy Almost All the Time. On this channel, I help people apply the practice of mindfulness and mindful self-awareness to be happier, less stressed, and more effective. I look forward to helping you as well, my friend. In this video, I'd like to share a very simple yet very powerful practice for dealing with unpleasant emotions like anger or fear or anxiety or sadness. And this practice will gradually help you to become free from these emotions. And in fact, to take it even a step further, the practice will help you transform these unpleasant emotions into the most positive emotion that we can experience as humans, in my opinion, which is compassion. Now, this is a four-step process. I originally learned this practice from a monk named Thich Nhat Hanh. I've adapted it quite a bit over the years as a result of working with hundreds of people, teaching this practice, getting feedback from them, and also giving it an acronym that I think is very easy to remember. The acronym is SCIL, SCIL. We'll break down each component of it first at a high level, and then we'll go into detail. So S stands for stop, and that means stop interacting with the perceived cause of the emotion. C is short for control and name, meaning we're going to control the breath and name the emotion. I means we're going to investigate the emotion. And L means we're going to look deeply into the true cause of the emotion. So let's start with the first step, which is to stop. The most important thing we can do is to stop interacting with the perceived cause of the emotion. Doing this only adds fuel to the fire, so to speak. So if we're anxious about something, try to remove ourselves from visual or audible reminders of what we're anxious about. The same goes for anger. If somebody said something that triggered anger within us, we want to politely remove ourselves from the space that they're in and not be looking at or interacting with the person if possible. Now, then you notice that I've used this term perceived cause of the emotion, and this is very intentional. And that is because the real cause of the emotion is not what happens to us, it's what we think about what happens to us. And so we'll come back to that a little bit later. But I just wanted to clarify that this is intentionally used. This term is used intentionally. So we stop interacting with this perceived cause of the anger because even though it is a perception, it's one that's very real for us and it can provoke an emotion that's oftentimes unpleasant. The second step is we want to control the breath and name the emotion. When we intentionally control the breathing, which is normally an autonomic function of the body, we actually short circuit the fight or flight response. So the fight or flight response is initiated in a part of the brain called the amygdala. And the moment you start consciously controlling the breath, you you start to lower activity in the amygdala, and brain activity starts to move to the prefrontal cortex, which is where we have some type of control over what we're doing. The amygdala is just all react mode, right? The name, the emotion part also has been shown through studies initially by Matthew Lieberman at UCLA. It's called affect labeling, but it's been shown to be just as likely or just as probable that it's going to short circuit the fight or flight response as the conscious controlling of the breath. So the idea is if there's anger, we just simply know there's anger here. If there's fear, we just note, oh, there's fear here. Now, how we combine those two, and when we combine those two, it can be incredibly powerful. We're creating a synergistic effect by using two well-proven methods for short-circuiting the fight or flight response. We're using them together. So what I recommend is you start consciously controlling the breathing. Once you've stopped and you've removed yourself from the perceived cause of the emotion, you take maybe just a couple minutes to consciously control the breath. And what you want to do is start with, you just want to focus on making the exhalation a little bit longer than normal. And after you exhale, just let the body breathe in naturally. It's going to do that whether you want it to or not. But the idea is, let's say you've been breathing kind of shallowly, which is very likely if you're anxious or angry. Try to extend the exhalation to 3 seconds, breathing out through the lips. So it's just like this. And then relax, let the body breathe in. And then do another one for three. And then after you've done a couple for 3 seconds, see if you can extend the exhalation to 4 seconds. After you've done two or three breaths like that, try to get to five. If you can, try to get all the way to seven. Now, as you're doing this, as you're breathing in, you could just note there is anger, if that's the emotion. And as you're breathing out, you could use the inner voice to note it's okay for anger to be here. Right? This is part of being human. It's okay. So it's just as the breath comes in, there is anger. As the breath is going out, it's okay for the anger to be here. Now, it should only take maybe a total of 10 breaths, and you should notice a significant reduction in the strength of the emotion. We're starting to unwind this spiral of emotion, which is very common. What happens is we have this perception, a thought about what's happening. It provokes an emotional response in the body that makes our thoughts start to move more quickly. And then that makes the emotion stronger. That makes the thoughts even faster. That makes the emotion stronger. Before you know it, we could be having a panic attack or be lashing out in anger. So this process that we're describing, this skill practice, actually unwinds the whole thing. So we start to slow this emotional response down in the body. That allows the thoughts to slow down a little bit. That further calms the emotion. That further allows the thoughts to slow down. And little by little, we unwind it until we get back to a neutral state and we're at peace. So the first two steps, again, are stop interacting with the perceived cause of the emotion. That's the S. And then C is to control and name the breath. Step three. So once you've done, again, maybe about 10 consciously controlled breaths, maybe your exhalations, five, six, sevens, whatever your body will comfortably allow. If you can get to seven, that's great. But minimum, I would shoot for five, unless you just have compromised lungs or something. Try to get to at least 5 seconds on the exhalation. Once you've done about 10 of those, you're probably in a space where you can now investigate the emotion. And this is a very, very important part of the practice. In fact, this video is in response to a comment that was left on another video. And the person was asking about, well, how should you allow yourself to feel an emotion? And the answer is absolutely. We do not want to ignore emotions, to suppress emotions. We also don't want to fuel these unpleasant emotions by continuing to talk to ourselves negatively. That's why we're trying to follow this process that I'm teaching. But it's perfectly natural and actually very healthy to allow these emotions to be experienced. So the third step is I, investigate. And what you want to do in this step is be curious. You don't have to control the breath anymore. You could just take a few minutes to sit still and just be really curious. What is this emotion actually like in the body? If you're feeling angry, for instance, which is actually very similar to fear or anxiety, you probably feel butterflies in the stomach. You probably feel some tension in the neck and the shoulders, maybe in the forearms, maybe in the face, there's some tension. You just kind of notice this, right? And you might use the breath as a foundation to make sure that you don't get sucked back into your thinking here. Not that you're focusing on the breath, but you just notice that the body's breathing. And the idea is, so just be curious about what is anger like as you breathe in. And then with the next out breath, what is anger like now? So it's just one breath at a time being curious. And then you might ask, what else do I notice other than what's happening in my own body? Do I notice anything else? So maybe some neutral sensations like sounds coming in, or what things that you see, or maybe just your feet on the floor. Again, not trying to focus on any of these things, just noticing what's coming in through the senses. And as you notice what's coming in through the senses, your body's giving you this real world, real time data that you are safe. And this starts to further calm down the fight or flight response in the body. Now, if you can do this for maybe 2 or 3 minutes and you feel like you have some space, then you might even notice, well, what are the thoughts around there? Or if there already is thinking, just mentally note that, oh, there's thinking about the perceived cause of the emotion again. That's okay. If there's lots of thinking, you could note there's lots of thinking. And then remind yourself, just sitting, what else do I notice? And what happens is that as you start to really get into the body, out of out of being caught up in thoughts, the emotion starts to calm down, and then you can start to see thoughts a little bit more objectively, a little bit more clearly. Again, you're using the body as a foundation. You'll notice you can see thoughts. You're not trying to see them directly, you're just observing the body. But you'll notice that you can see thoughts coming and going, and they start to have a little bit more space. There's a little bit more space around them, a little bit more space between awareness and thoughts. And this whole thing unwinds, right? Now, if you do this for 2 or 3 minutes and you feel like you've returned to a completely neutral state, now you can go on to step 4, which is to look deeply. Now, at any point, as you're looking deeply, if you feel triggered again, you can go back to whatever step you need to start over with, whether it's 1, 2, or 3, and do that again until you get back to a neutral, peaceful state, and then engage with step 4. And step 4 is we're looking deeply at the perceived cause of the emotion. And doing this reminds us that the cause of the emotion is not what happens. It's our thinking about what happens. It's the story that we're telling ourselves. So for instance, let's say somebody cuts you off in traffic. The thought might be, oh, this person's a jerk. And we feel really angry. Well, you could ask yourself the question, is that story necessarily true? Is there another story that could be equally true? Maybe the person's in a rush to get to the hospital to visit a loved one who's dying, and they were just distracted. Well, if that were true, you wouldn't feel anger at all, would you? You would feel compassion. And that's where step 4 becomes so powerful. When you really look deeply into the behaviors of other people, what you'll find over and over and over again is that people are just doing the best they can with what they have. If a person is not highly self-aware in any moment, they're just following their programming. They're doing whatever their brain is allowing them to do. This is true even, let's just say maybe the person was a jerk, right? Well, why are they a jerk? If you really think about it for a second, well, people aren't born that way, right? And if they are, then they have no control over it. But either case, they're either born that way and that's your genetics, which they have no control over, or maybe their life experiences created this situation. Maybe they were abused as a child, emotionally or physically. And now these behaviors are coming out as an adult. Now, again, at any point, if you get triggered, you can go back to get yourself back to a neutral state. But it's really helpful to take a moment or two to just think through what are possible explanations for this other than the original story I told myself. So that might be the process you could follow. Then this is the process I usually recommend is you ask yourself, first part of step 4 is, what story am I telling myself about what happened? And it's okay, whatever the story is, don't beat yourself up, don't judge yourself. Like, just be honest. What is the story that you're telling yourself? And then the follow-up question is, do I know that that story is true? Am I 100% certain that story is true? Or could there be another equally true story or more true story? And I think every time you do this, every time you reflect, what happens is you have a little bit more compassion for other people. And you also have a little bit more compassion for yourself. You realize you're doing the best that you can. Whatever you just did a moment ago couldn't happen any other way. Nothing that could ever be different about that. What you do have control over is, can you be compassionate to yourself? Can you accept yourself as you are in this moment and thereby increase the ability that you can grow and be a slightly better version of yourself in the next moment? And if the answer is, of course, you can. But it starts with accepting yourself as you are now and accepting others as they are now. And so by engaging in this simple 4-step process, if you practice with this, I'm very confident that in a matter of 3 minutes, 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, if you're really triggered, you can go from being pretty upset, experiencing a pretty unpleasant emotion, to feeling at a minimum at peace, and perhaps even resting in the most beautiful emotion I think we can experience as humans, which is compassion. I hope this video was helpful for you. If you have a question about the practice of mindfulness or mindful self-awareness, please be sure to subscribe to this channel and leave your question as a comment in one of the videos on the channel. I'll do my best to answer that question or one like it. If you'd like a great resource for practicing mindfulness and mindful self-awareness, you might like my book, The Magic of Mindful Self-Awareness: How to Stop Overthinking, Clear Your Mind, and Be Happy Almost All the Time. There's a link in the description. Until next time, may you be happy and kind, my friend.